In this video, we're going to be showing how to paint the flesh of a model using a light skin tone palette. Now, there are numerous ways you can do this. You can start with a dark base coat and build those highlights and layers up, or you can start with a light base coat or even undercoat such as Wraithbone and Corax White, and then just shade and highlight from there. But in this particular video, we're going to be painting a Blood Wreather, and we've undercoated him using Wraithbone, as you can see here. Now, this is a perfect model because they've got lots of muscle tone and a nice face to paint as well. Now, the first colour we're going to be using is Cadian Flesh Tone. This is going to be our base coat, so I'm going to be using a medium base coat for this, and all I'm going to do is get a couple of dollops onto my palette. Now, I like to thin this down, especially when doing any kind of base coating, because we don't want it too thick and goopy. We can always build those layers up as well. So just a paintbrush of water should be sufficient enough, and you'll usually be able to feel it because it's not too thick and goopy, it's less resistant as well. So once we've got enough on our brush, we're then ready to start painting the model. So all we're going to be doing here is just starting to layer that Cadian Flesh Tone over. Now, once it's dry, if you can see any Wraithbone showing through, just do a second thin coat over the top. There we are with the Cadian Flesh Tone now layered. We're going to move on to our next step, which is to add some detail to that skin by applying a contrast paint to it, which is going to be Guilliman Flesh. Now, I'm going to thin this down. You don't have to, but I'm going to thin it down just because it will give the results I want from this skin tone. So all I'm going to do is apply a paintbrush of contrast medium to my palette and a paintbrush of the actual contrast, which is Guilliman Flesh. So I'm just going to get a little bit on my brush like so. Don't want to overload it too much. Just get enough on there so it doesn't pull. And all I'm going to do is then start applying that all over the skin. And you'll see it will just run into those recesses, and you'll start to see some of that Cadian Flesh Tone on the raised areas. Just do this all over the skin and then wait for it to dry. There we are with the contrast now dry. We're going to move on to the next steps of the skin. We're going to start by relayering the skin using Cadian Flesh Tone. This is just to remove some of the blotchy effects on some of those large surface areas. After that, we're going to highlight with Kislev Flesh and then finish off with a highlight of Screaming Skull. So first of all, let's start with that Cadian Flesh Tone. So I'm just using a smaller brush, which is a small layer brush this time. Let's get a little bit to the palette, again a touch of water, just to make sure it's not too thick and goopy. Get our brush to a nice point, and then we're ready to start relayering. So all we're aiming to do is, like I said, just pick out those surface areas just on the top, avoiding the recesses. This will remove some of the blotchiness, but also give it a bit of a subtle layer as well. Now, if you do find you get into those recesses by accident, just reapply Guilliman Flesh into those cracks. With that tidy up, or that relayer now done, we're going to start highlighting for this. We're going to be using Kislev Flesh first of all. So what we're aiming to do here is just start highlighting all that muscle as much as we can. Now this can be quite a chunky highlight to start off with, because the next highlight is going to be a lot thinner. But if you do make any mistakes, just get some of that Cadian Flesh Tone and then just tidy back up. And there we are with the Kislev Flesh highlight now done. We're going to move on to using Screaming Skull. And what we're aiming to do here is just pick out some of those real extremities, like his nose, his cheeks, knuckles, and some of the larger areas of muscle like his pecs. Just a real fine highlight. Try and get the brushes to a nicer point as you possibly can. There we are with those highlights now done. We're going to move on to our final step, which is to apply a glaze. Now we're going to be using one of the mid-tone colours, which is going to be Cadian Flesh Tone, to make our glaze. Now the idea behind this is it's going to just tone down some of those highlights and just give more of a subtle transition from some of those shades as well. So it just gives it a nice subtle blend across the whole model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using a medium layer brush, so something a little bit larger, and I have 4 paint brushes of Lamy Medium. So just dot those on first. And all you need is the tiniest amount of Cadian Flesh Tone. So I'm just going to get a tip of Cadian Flesh Tone onto my brush like so. So about that much. Then we're going to mix it in. And you're kind of looking for the consistency of milk here. Now, if it looks a bit too thick, just add a little bit more Lamy Medium. If it looks too thin, just add a little bit more Cadian Flesh Tone. But I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do is just load my brush up. And what we're aiming to do here, it's not a shade, so we're not just going to the recesses. We're going to coat it over the whole model. So it's almost like you're doing a layer. So what I'm going to do is just coat that all over, from the shades to the highlights. And what you'll find as it dries, some of those darker recesses will become a little bit lighter, and so those highlights will just be toned down ever so slightly. Like I said, it will give it more of a natural blended feel to it. And there we are with that glaze now applied and dry. You can see it's really subtly changed those lowlights and those highlights just to help blend it all together. Now, this is one example of painting light skin. Just by changing 1 or 2 colours, you can get some vast varieties in different skin tones. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoy experimenting with your own light skin tones, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.